The skies over Varos 9 bled red like a wounded beast. Once a world of emerald trees and tranquil blue lakes, it had been reduced to ash and silence. The Zalari, a proud and peaceful race, were now scattered remnants clinging to their last city, barely more than rubble and memory. Commander Ralek stood atop the crumbling watchtower, wind tugging at the shredded edges of his cloak. His armor, once the polished obsidian of a war leader, was now dulled and cracked. He gripped the last emergency flare in his trembling hand, a ceremonial act more than a call for aid. Because no one was coming. 2 cycles ago, the Zorth Dominion had arrived in their monstrous warships, declaring that Varos 9 belonged to the Empire. The Zalari resisted and paid the price. The Accord had promised protection. The Arkari Council had vowed retaliation. The Kian had even broadcast a formal statement of solidarity. But in the end, when the skies burned and the people screamed, the galaxy turned its back. Messages sent, distress beacons launched, silence returned. Ralek looked down over the devastated outskirts. Hundreds of Zalari corpses rotted beneath the sun, their violet blood soaking into the scorched soil. The Dominion's machines, those crawling, soulless collectors, swept across the dead, processing bodies into fuel. It was cruelty with efficiency, genocide as protocol. Behind him, Lieutenant Saran limped up the tower stairs. His right leg was wrapped in bloodied cloth, and his weapon sparked with every step, held together more by hope than mechanics. "They've breached the second wall," Saran said, panting, "and our last comm station's gone dark. No reinforcements, no answer." Ralek didn't reply. He already knew. He'd known for weeks. Saran placed a hand on the edge of the battlement, eyes scanning the sky like he expected something to change. "It's over, Commander." Ralek closed his eyes, gripping the flare tighter. Then, a low, unnatural hum broke the silence. Saran turned. "Do you hear that?" It wasn't Dominion. It wasn't the usual whining scream of their atmospheric ships. This was something deeper, rougher, like the sky itself was growling. A distant streak of light tore through the upper atmosphere. Not graceful, not controlled. It ripped through the clouds like a burning spear hurled by a wrathful god. "What the hell is that?" Saran asked. Ralek shielded his eyes. The streak grew, separating into multiple glowing objects, no, weapons, descending in a perfect arc. Then came the boom. A Dominion cruiser orbiting above exploded in a flash of light and smoke, its shields never even activated. Just gone, ripped apart by kinetic force and savage velocity. No lasers, no plasma, just raw, furious mass. Then it came. The ship. Black, angular, screaming through the sky like it wanted the universe to hear its rage. It hovered just above the battlefield, massive and alien in its simplicity. No ornate design, no glowing sigils. It looked built to do one thing: kill. Its name glinted on the side in an old, forgotten script the Zalari barely recognized. Vindicta. The Dominion forces hesitated. For the first time since their invasion, they didn't advance. They stared up at the sky. The voice that followed wasn't a whisper. It was a war cry that broke across every frequency, every Dominion channel, every abandoned comms tower still functional on Varos 9. "This is Terran Warship Vindicta. To the Zalari of Varos 9, your call was received. You are not alone. To the Dominion, this is your reckoning." Saran staggered back, his mouth open. Terrans? I thought they were extinct, or hiding. Ralek didn't answer. His throat tightened as he watched the ship rotate, its cannons aligning with the Dominion positions on the ground. One by one, the monsters who had ravaged his people began to backpedal. He lowered the flare. He didn't need it anymore. The humans had come. and judging by the sound of their weapons charging, they were not here to negotiate. The Dominion's forward units broke formation. Zorth warriors, those towering, bone-armored beasts who once marched without hesitation, now paused, unsure. For the first time since the invasion began, they hesitated. Their tactical uplinks screamed confusion. Their orders stopped mid-transmission. Something had just shifted in the war, and they could feel it deep in their blood. Above them, the Vindicta loomed like a predator with teeth made of iron and fury. From the bridge of the shattered command center, Ralek watched with a strange sense of disbelief. He leaned closer to the observation screen, the dying city casting long shadows beneath the human warship. "Patch the frequency," he said. Saran looked at him. "Ours or theirs?" "Theirs." He didn't know what he expected. Maybe static, maybe rejection, maybe some cold Terran voice demanding submission, but instead, the moment the link established, a face appeared. Harsh, square-jawed, human. A soldier's face, unshaven, tired, angry. "Terran vessel Vindicta, this is Commander Ralek of the Zalari Resistance," he said, stiffening. The human didn't smile. His eyes flicked to the side, clearly watching multiple battle feeds at once. "Ralek, you're the one who sent the distress signal." "I am." "We heard it." Silence stretched between them. Ralek didn't know what to say. He had prepared 1,000 speeches, demands, and pleas, but now they weren't necessary. "What are your intentions?" he finally asked. The Terran officer's lip twitched, just enough to be a smirk, or maybe just disgust. "To return the favor." And with that, the feed cut. On the battlefield, hell was unleashed. The Vindicta roared, not in sound, but in fury. Dropships plummeted from its belly like birds of prey, slamming into the earth with explosive grace. Their doors opened mid-descent, and Terran soldiers launched into battle in jet-powered exosuits. Bulky, ugly, efficient. Each suit carried weapons far beyond Dominion comprehension. Rail cannons, plasma-charged flechettes, electromagnetic blades. The Dominion's disciplined lines broke immediately. Zorth units screamed in their native tongue, scrambling for cover as the human onslaught hit them like a tidal wave of vengeance. Ralek and Saran watched it all unfold from the tower. They couldn't look away. "By the stars," Saran muttered. "They fight like they're angry." Ralek gave a short nod. Number not angry. "Then what?" "Furious." Below them, a human unit advanced through the west corridor of the city, clearing Dominion clusters with brutal precision. They didn't just shoot, they annihilated. Buildings weren't spared if they had Dominion tech inside. No strategic pauses, no hesitation. Every step the humans took was a statement. "You should never have touched this planet." One of the Zalari children hiding in the bunker below cried out as an explosion rocked the building, but a moment later, it was followed by a different sound. A human voice, calm and direct, shouting over loudspeakers in broken Zalari dialect. "Stay down. We are not here to harm. We are cleaning the infestation." Ralek blinked. "They learned our language?" "They answered a call no one else did," Saran whispered. "I don't think anything surprises me anymore." Hours passed. The Dominion's foothold on Varos 9 shrank like ice under a sun. Their commanders tried to retreat, but the Vindicta tracked them, fried their escape ships mid-air, and dropped orbital spikes to trap them. Ralek finally received a ground-level transmission. "Zalari Commander," the voice said. It was the same human from before. "This is Captain Marcus Thorne. We've secured the Central Zone. Your city is under our protection." Ralek didn't know what moved him more, the words or the fact that someone had said them without asking for tribute. "Why?" he asked, raw. There was a pause on the line. Then, "Because someone did this to us once, and no one came." We remember what that felt like. Ralek couldn't speak. He didn't need to. The skies were no longer red. They still burned, but now with fire that didn't belong to the Dominion. Hope, for the first time in months, didn't feel like a lie. The fires were still burning, but they weren't spreading anymore. Ralek walked through the heart of what used to be his capital, now a battlefield of broken Dominion machines and shattered buildings. But for the first time in months, the air didn't taste like defeat. It smelled like steel, smoke, and survival. Human soldiers moved like ghosts through the streets, clad in thick exo-armor that groaned with power. They barely spoke. Their movements were precise, surgical, like they had done this before, many times. Too many, maybe. Saran limped beside Ralek, one hand on a temporary crutch, the other holding a salvaged comm link. He watched a human squad use pulse charges to tear down a Dominion sensor tower without damaging the nearby housing bunker. They move like machines, Saran muttered. But not cold ones. Ralek nodded. He had noticed it too. The brutality was there, but it had purpose and control. A soldier approached them, tall, dark-skinned, with a scar that crossed one eye like a jagged lightning bolt. He removed his helmet as he came near, revealing short-cropped hair, sweat, and tired eyes. "Commander Ralek?" he asked in a gravelly Terran voice. "I am." The man gave a curt nod. "Captain Thorne wants to speak to you, face to face." Ralek studied him for a moment. "And who are you?" "Staff Sergeant Briggs. I'm your escort. Don't worry, we're not here to occupy you, just to end the nightmare." Ralek allowed himself a small, cautious smile. "Lead the way." The human outpost had been constructed overnight, literally. Using drop-assembled modular platforms, their engineers had turned a bombed-out market square into a functioning command base. Giant barricades of plasma-fused metal sealed the perimeter, and drones buzzed overhead in lazy arcs. Briggs led Ralek and Saran through 2 checkpoints. The guards didn't salute. They scanned. Efficient, alert, deadly. Inside the central hub, Captain Marcus Thorne stood before a holographic map, arms crossed over his chest. The map flickered with Dominion movement, red clusters blinking rapidly as they shrank beneath coordinated human strikes. Thorne looked up as they entered. "Commander, glad you're still breathing." Ralek stepped forward. "You saved us." Thorne's jaw flexed. "You're not the first species to say that, but most didn't say thanks." "I'm not most," Ralek replied. Thorne gave a faint nod. "Good. That'll make what comes next easier." Ralek tensed. "What do you mean?" Thorne pointed to a part of the hologram that showed a mountain ridge, one of the last strongholds the Dominion hadn't abandoned. "They're cornered, but they're not beaten. Intel shows they've moved their biocommand node there, high-level Zorth generals, portable labs, and worse, civilians." Ralek blinked. "Zilari civilians?" "No," Thorne said. "Your people they took, for experiments, assimilation, reproduction cycles." Saran's breath caught. Ralek stepped forward. "You're sure?" "We intercepted their field transmissions. Audio's ugly, screams. You don't want to hear it." Ralek's hands clenched. "Let me lead a strike force." "No." Thorne's voice was firm. "You don't have the weapons. You don't have the gear. You go in there, you die, and they kill the hostages out of spite." "Then what do you suggest?" Thorne tapped the map. "We go in. Full assault. But we'll need to breach 3 entry points at once. They'll expect one. We give them 3. Ralek didn't speak right away. He studied the Terran's face. This wasn't a man offering help out of nobility. This was personal. Deeply. "You've fought the Dominion before," Ralek said slowly. "Haven't you?" Thorne nodded, eyes hard. They wiped out one of our colonies on the edge of the Perseus Arm, left only children alive, to send a message. He looked up. We got the message. This is our reply. Ralek extended a hand, a Zalari gesture of honor. Thorn stared at it for a moment, then grasped it tightly. All right, the human said. Then let's remind them why humanity stopped asking for help and started becoming the monster's worst nightmare. Outside, the soldiers began to mobilize. Weapons clicked, engines roared, drones realigned their flight paths. The Dominion stronghold had 1 day left, 2 at best, and when the sun rose again, fire would fall from the sky. The plan was madness. 3 simultaneous breaches on a Dominion fortress buried deep into the Verosian ridge. Tunnels, rock chambers, and biochemical bunkers threaded through that mountain like a hive of rot. Dominion command would be waiting, armed, fortified, and desperate. And desperate enemies never fought clean. Ralek stood on the edge of the makeshift launch platform as the Terran dropships prepared for lift. Each vessel was bulky, squared off, and painted with a thick, scarred black armor that didn't gleam. It absorbed the light. These weren't meant to impress. They were meant to survive. Saran, still limping but too stubborn to stay behind, adjusted the unfamiliar Terran armor fitted over his Zalari frame. I look ridiculous, Ralek chuckled. You look alive. That's more than you did a week ago. Fair point. Across the loading bay, humans loaded power cores, ammunition belts, and weapon crates that pulsed with eerie blue light. Ralek had never seen such tools of war. Some of them didn't even look like weapons. One soldier held what looked like a metallic gauntlet that hummed with inner energy, its surface constantly shifting. Adaptive tech, Briggs explained as he approached. Reconfigures to match the target's biology. Most effective on Zorth. Hurts them where it counts. Ralek blinked. You built weapons for them specifically? Briggs's smile didn't reach his eyes. We remember who hurt us, and we plan accordingly. Captain Thorne's voice echoed from a nearby command tower. Final call. All squads report in. Ground assault begins in 15 minutes. No mistakes, no mercy. Ralek climbed aboard his assigned dropship. Inside, the atmosphere felt heavier, not from gravity, from intent. Terrans didn't hype themselves up before battle. They didn't chant, didn't boast, didn't roar like the Dominion. They just sat there, quiet, focused, checking gear, syncing comms. Like this was another day at the office, another extermination. Ralek sat across from a woman in a scarred exosuit. She caught him staring and nodded once. Her face was half metal, clearly rebuilt after some horrendous injury. Her voice came out through a modulator, clipped and cold. First drop? Ralek nodded. She leaned forward slightly. Don't hesitate. Don't freeze. If you see something not breathing right, shoot it. If it bleeds purple, burn it. If it moves after that, vaporize it. He nodded again, slower. The pilot's voice buzzed overhead. 3, 2, 1. Drop. The ship lurched. For a moment, Ralek's stomach lifted into his throat as they plummeted through the skies, the ridges below racing up at them like jagged teeth. Anti-air fire lit the sky almost immediately. Green tracer rounds, plasma bolts, automated flak. But the Terran dropship didn't veer. It accelerated. Briggs shouted over the comms, "Brace for impact!" The ship slammed into the rocky outcrop just outside the Dominion base. No finesse, just brute force and instant deployment. Doors burst open, and the Terrans exploded out like hounds unleashed. Ralek stumbled forward, still adjusting to the armor's weight. Saran was already firing, side by side with a human heavy gunner whose cannon spun with a high-pitched whine that reduced 3 Zorth foot soldiers into vaporized mist. The battlefield was chaos. The ridge echoed with the unholy screeches of Dominion war beasts and the rhythmic, brutal roar of human weapons. Drones darted through narrow cave corridors, planting charges, relaying enemy positions in real time to the HUD inside every helmet. Captain Thorne's voice cut through the noise. "Squad Alpha, breach outer labs. Bravo, sweep the east tunnels. Charlie team, you're with me. We're going for the node." Ralek and Saran pushed forward with Squad Alpha, their path leading into a narrow crevice where the walls pulsed with living tissue, Dominion biotech, grown like cancer inside the stone. It writhed slightly as they passed. Ralek's stomach turned. A Dominion sentry lunged from the shadows, a 7-foot beast of claws and bone blades. It slammed into a Terran scout, ripping through his armor before anyone could react. Blood sprayed the walls. Ralek didn't think. He moved. He fired his pulse rifle into the beast's side, and when it turned on him, he stabbed forward with his backup plasma blade. It screamed as Saran finished it with a charged round to the head. The Terran woman from earlier nodded at him. "Not bad," Ralek panted. "I didn't hesitate." "No," she said. "You didn't." They pushed deeper. As the squad reached the first lab chamber, what they saw stopped them in their tracks. Rows of Zalari civilians, suspended in biopods, their skin pale, their eyes open but unseeing. Tubes ran from their arms into Dominion processors. Some were barely alive. Others were being changed. Saran stepped forward, face pale with fury. What is this?" Briggs scanned the room. "Genetic splicing. They're turning your people into hybrids, slaves. Or worse, breeding stock." Ralek felt something inside him crack. "We shut it down," he said coldly. "Agreed," said the human. He raised a small black box from his belt, tapped it once, and planted it on the nearest processor. "Evac the pods. Then we torch the rest." Ralek looked at the suffering faces in the pods, then to the humans working methodically to free them. This wasn't about politics or strategy. This was retribution, the kind that burned entire legacies to ash. The lab chamber exploded behind them. The charge Briggs had set was not small. It had been designed to reduce Dominion biotech into unrecognizable dust. As the walls caved and flames devoured everything inside, the pods carrying the rescued Zalari civilians were lifted away by emergency evac drones, swarming upward toward the sky like a silver flock escaping a firestorm. Ralek didn't look back. He couldn't. His mind was still full of the images, his people trapped, violated, deformed by science that knew no mercy. The Dominion hadn't just come to conquer Varos 9. They came to rewrite it, to make it unrecognizable. Now it was their turn to be erased. "Commander," Saran barked, snapping him from the daze. "We've got movement, North Tunnel." Briggs stepped in beside them, his rifle raised, HUD scanning. "Thorne's squad is deeper inside. We're pushing too slow. If they reach the command node alone, they'll be cut off." Ralek nodded. "Then we move faster." Their squad advanced into the next sector, a tunnel that narrowed into a vast open chamber, pulsing with Dominion infrastructure. The walls were lined with what looked like breathing muscle and bone plating. In the center stood a massive throne-like structure grown from the ground, where a single Zorth commander awaited, armored in ceremonial gold plating fused to his skin. He spoke without moving his mouth. The words slithered into their minds. "Terran filth! Zalari traitors! You think you can stop what is already sown? This world is reborn in our image." Briggs didn't respond. He fired. The plasma bolt struck the Zorth's shoulder, but the commander absorbed it, roaring back with a psychic blast that knocked half the squad against the wall. Ralek hit the ground hard, dazed. Before he could recover, the Zorth leapt from his throne, blades extending from his wrists like elongated claws. He was fast. Too fast. A human corporal screamed as the creature impaled him. Another was flung across the chamber, armor torn open like paper. Briggs rolled aside, shouting, "Focus fire!" But it was chaos. The Zorth commander moved like a blur, dodging, twisting, slashing. For a moment, it looked like they were going to lose the whole squad right there. Then Ralek saw it. The glowing cluster of tissue in the Zorth's lower back, the control nexus, a vulnerability. Probably where his mind connected to the Dominion's hive systems. He rose, grabbed the fallen corporal's rifle, and charged. The Zorth noticed too late. He turned just in time to slash Ralek's side, but not deep enough. Ralek fired point-blank into the cluster, once, twice, then slammed the plasma blade deep into it. The Zorth screamed, not with rage but confusion. He collapsed into a twitching heap, his neural link severed, his thoughts dissolving into static. Silence fell. Briggs slowly stood up, blood leaking from a gash on his forehead. "Remind me not to piss you off, Commander." Ralek, panting, staggered to his knees. "I didn't hesitate." "No," Briggs said, "you didn't." The remaining squad regrouped. 2 dead, 1 critically wounded, but the path was now open. A ping hit Briggs's comm. He opened the feed. Captain Thorne's voice crackled through. "Node location confirmed. Reached Central Core. Heavy resistance. I need that secondary team moving now." "We're en route," Briggs replied. "Zorth commander is down." Thorne's voice had steel in it. "Good. Now let's end this." They pushed deeper. The Dominion complex changed as they advanced. The tech grew darker, more desperate. Wires became tendrils. Steel gave way to bone. Screams echoed faintly through the walls, machine-driven torment. And then they reached it, the central node, a vast spherical chamber glowing with red and violet light. Hundreds of cables ran from a central mass, hanging from the ceiling like the guts of a god. The Dominion's command AI, if such a word even applied. Part biological, part digital. All cruel. Thorne's squad was already inside, trading fire with what looked like the last of the Zorth elite. Twisted warriors with armor fused directly into their flesh, and rifles growing from their arms. Ralek's team hit them from the flank, and the tide shifted instantly. Plasma tore through muscle. Kinetic rounds punched holes in monstrosities that barely resembled sentient beings anymore. One by one, the Zorth fell, until only silence remained. Thorne stood in the middle of the chamber, blood trailing down his arm, his armor scorched. He nodded once at Ralek. "You made it." Ralek approached the core. "What happens if we destroy it?" Thorne stared at the throbbing mass. "The entire Dominion network on this planet collapses. Units go feral. Command dies. But there's one catch." "What is it?" "It's not just a computer. It's alive. It feels everything. And it'll fight back when it knows it's dying." As if hearing that, the lights in the room turned blood red. The cables shifted. A deep, inhuman voice filled the chamber. "You will die screaming." Thorne raised his rifle, aimed at the core, and smiled grimly. "Not today." The command node didn't wait for them to fire. It attacked first. Tendrils shot out like spears from the ceiling, slamming into the ground around Thorne's squad. One soldier screamed as a cable pierced through his chest, lifting him into the air before throwing him against the wall with a wet crack. The chamber roared to life. From every dark corner, half-grown Zorth bio-clones spilled out, naked, twitching, still wet with nutrient gel. Their eyes glowed with a hive-red light. No tactics, no speech, just rage, unthinking, unyielding. "Form up," Thorne shouted. "Protect the commander and the charge." Ralek dove for cover behind a fractured piece of Dominion plating as Saran and Briggs opened fire, cutting down the first wave of clones. They dropped fast, but more kept coming. Sloppy, suicidal attacks. Biting, clawing, dying just to buy time. Rayleigh held up the fusion detonator. "How long do we need to prime it?" 30 seconds, Briggs called out, slamming another magazine into his rifle. "We won't last 30, Saran growled, swiping his plasma blade across a lunging creature that screamed in a language that sounded more machine than organic. Thorn didn't hesitate. He grabbed the second detonator strapped to his belt and tossed it to Ralek. "Get to the core. I'll hold this choke." "But," Ralek began, "that's an order." Ralek didn't argue. He ran. The tendrils lashed at him, slicing the air beside his head. He ducked beneath one, rolled across the metallic floor, and slid behind the pulsating core. It was alive, breathing. A horrible rhythm, wet, labored, like it was suffering and surviving at the same time. He planted the charge. The core reacted instantly. A psychic wave knocked him backward. Images, visions, flooded his mind. Zalari cities burning, children screaming, humans torn apart on other worlds. Pain, endless, exquisite pain. Not physical, existential. The Dominion AI was trying to break him, trying to make him feel every death it had ever caused. Ralek screamed, gripping his head. His thoughts flickered, his knees buckled, and then he saw another image, not destruction, a face, his sister, alive, inside one of the pods, her eyes wide, terrified, her lips moving. "Don't stop!" He forced himself upright. Blood ran from his nose. The detonator blinked green. "Charge primed!" he shouted through the comm. Briggs barked back. "We need extraction now." Above them, the Vindicta's orbital comms finally cut in. "This is Warship Vindicta. Evac window in 90 seconds. You need to move." Ralek turned to see Thorn grab a clone by the neck and crush its skull against the wall. The captain's armor was half destroyed. His left arm barely moved, but he was still standing, still killing. Briggs grabbed Saran. "Get the commander, let's move!" They ran, all of them. The room began collapsing. The core thrashed in agony, its tendrils flailing wildly, slamming into walls, into the ground, trying to rip its killers apart before the end. Ralek looked back once. Thorn was still inside. He hadn't moved. "Where's Thorn?" he shouted. Briggs shoved him forward. "He's buying us time. Don't waste it." "No, we go back." "Ralek!" Saran roared. "Move!" They burst through the crumbling exit tunnel as the fusion charge detonated. The explosion wasn't loud. It was deep. Like the planet itself had coughed up a scream. A shockwave of red light poured from the chamber, chasing them like a tidal wave. Dominion infrastructure began to melt, literally melt, as the core's death triggered a systemic breakdown. Lights blinked out. The walls groaned and collapsed. Screeches from the dying hive mind echoed behind them, half code, half agony. Then came light. A beam from the sky pierced the mountaintop, the Vindicta's main lift platform. Grapple hooks fired. Extraction drones locked onto the fleeing soldiers and yanked them skyward, one by one. Ralek's boots left the ground just as the mountain beneath him imploded, reduced to rubble, fire, and silence. They landed back at base an hour later. The sky above Varos 9 was blue again, still hazy, still trembling, but blue. The Dominion signal had gone dead. Completely. No more relays, no more orbital pings, no more psychic interference. Just quiet. Ralek stood beside Briggs and Saran as the medical teams triaged the wounded and processed the survivors. The rescued Zalari civilians had been stabilized. Some were too far gone, but others, like Ralek's sister, they lived. He walked to her pod as the medics opened it. Her body was weak, her skin pale, but her eyes opened, and they focused. "Brother," she whispered. He dropped to his knees, gripping her hand, tears running down his face. "I told you I'd come back," he said. "I didn't come alone." Later, as the sun dipped low, a final message came from the Vindicta. Text only. "Target eliminated. Mission complete. We're not heroes. We're human. And this galaxy just remembered why that matters." The war was over, but the silence that followed it wasn't peace. It was something heavier. Grief. Exhaustion. The kind of quiet that hangs over the ruins after the screaming ends. Varos 9 still stood. Barely. The last fires had been smothered, the Dominion technology turned to slag. But the damage was everywhere. Collapsed towers, dead fields, broken families. Thousands had been lost. The surviving Zalari moved like ghosts among the ashes, scavenging what they could from the wreckage of their own civilization. And above it all, the Vindicta hovered in low orbit, its engines silent, its presence casting a long, dark shadow across the land. Ralek hadn't slept in 2 days. He sat outside the new medical tent, watching the survivors pass by in uneven lines. His sister lay inside, recovering slowly, her body still trying to undo the horrors the Dominion had injected into her. The medics, Zalari and Terran alike, worked tirelessly. Briggs sat beside him, nursing a cracked rib and sipping from a steel flask. "You did good," Briggs muttered. Ralek didn't look at him. "We survived. Sometimes that's the hardest victory to win." There was a pause. The wind picked up, dry and sharp. Ralek finally asked the question that had burned inside him since they left the mountain. "Thorn, there's no chance, is there?" Briggs shook his head once. "No remains. No signal." He made sure the node died with him. Ralek closed his eyes. "He saved us." "Yeah," Briggs said, his voice tighter than usual. "He saved a lot more than that." There was another pause, heavier this time. "We've got orders to pull out tomorrow," Briggs added. "Our job's done." Ralek turned to him. "Just like that?" Briggs shrugged. "That's what humans do, Commander. We hit, we burn, we vanish." Ralek didn't respond. Briggs leaned forward, his voice lowering. "But there's talk. The Accord is waking up now. All those cowards who ignored your signals, now they want in. Now they want to help rebuild." Ralek laughed bitterly. "Of course they do. Now that the monsters are dead?" Briggs grinned. "That's why we're not telling them everything." Ralek looked at him. "You think the Dominion was the only threat out here?" Briggs asked. "They weren't. But the Accord likes to believe in comfort. Paper alliances. They never liked Terrans because we remind them of something they buried a long time ago." "What's that?" Briggs took another sip, then stood up. "That peace is never permanent, and that monsters don't always look alien." He started to walk away, then paused. "You've got a choice coming, Commander. You can rebuild your world the old way, peace, council meetings, blind trust, or you can rebuild it to survive the next storm." Ralek frowned. "And if I wanted help with that?" Briggs smiled thinly. "The Vindicta doesn't do diplomacy, but she always answers the right kind of signal." That night, Ralek stood alone on the same tower where, just weeks ago, he had prepared to die. The flare he never fired still sat beside him, dusty and untouched. Now the beacon had changed. A new signal, one that didn't beg. It warned. And above him the Vindicta began to rise. No fanfare, no thanks. Just the silent rumble of engines that had carried humanity through 100 wars, leaving behind liberated ashes and terrified enemies. Ralek watched it go, a strange feeling stirring in his chest. Not worship, not awe, something colder. Understanding. Humanity didn't save them out of kindness. It wasn't mercy that brought the Vindicta. It was memory and vengeance. He looked to the stars, knowing others were watching now, and maybe, just maybe, they were afraid again. as they should be. 6 months passed. Varos 9 had changed. The rubble was still there, but now it stood beside reconstruction. Temporary shelters were replaced by stone structures with solar mesh roofing. Old monuments to peace were re-etched with new words, not just of survival, but warning. A new council formed, not bloated diplomats in silk robes, but soldiers, engineers, survivors, people who remembered how close the world came to dying. At the head of it sat Commander Ralek. He didn't want the title, never asked for it, but the people chose him. Because he had stood tall when everything else crumbled, because he had bled beside them, fought beside them, because he was the one the humans had spoken to as equals. Now, every few weeks, a small black tower on the northern ridge blinked once, just once, sending out a pulse. Not a distress call, a signal, a reminder. Ralek stood beside it now, arms folded as the pulse faded into the atmosphere. "You really think they're still listening?" Saran asked behind him. His limp was worse these days, but he still refused to accept a prosthetic. "The Terrans, your mysterious friends in the sky. They hear more than we think," Ralek replied. Saran smirked. "Not exactly warm and fuzzy, are they?" "No," Ralek said, turning towards the horizon. "They're not. But when fire falls from the sky, I'd rather it fall with me than on me." There was a pause. The two stood in silence, looking out over the growing city. Children ran through narrow paths, laughter echoing faintly. Somewhere, a group of builders tested the strength of a new energy grid. A soldier helped a farmer carry a barrel of water up a slope. It wasn't peace, but it was progress. And for now, that was enough. That night, Ralek dreamt of fire, not the kind that burned homes, but the fire of retribution, of justice in motion. He saw again the image he'd never forget, the Vindicta, bursting through the sky, screaming defiance into the face of a merciless empire. He woke before dawn, sweating. There was a message on his personal comms. Encrypted. Unmarked. He opened it. "Commander Ralek, we are watching. Dominion fragments have been detected near the outer systems. Not a full resurgence, but splinters. They're gathering. Learning. Waiting. This time, don't wait for them to knock. We'll be in orbit. You know what to do. No signature. No reply link. Just silence after that." But it was enough. Ralek rose, stepped outside into the early light, and looked toward the stars. Not with fear, not even with hope, with resolve. This time he wouldn't beg for help. This time he would send the fire first, because he was no longer just a survivor. He was something else now. The first Zalari to understand what humanity truly was. Not saviors, not monsters, not allies. A reckoning.